Hi everyone, my name is Jennifer Edwards. If you don't already know me, I'm coming to you live from Sayreville, New Jersey. I wanted to get on here today to share like a recent experience that we had that I'm thinking that sharing our story might be able to help somebody. And so I'm hoping that it might help somebody to share this. So I was just thinking that, today we went to see a specialist with my kids. I thought I'd share a little bit about what's been going on with them and what's been going on with our lives, which has kind of taken me off Facebook a lot lately. Like I said, I hope that sharing my story kind of gets some information out about what we've been dealing with. So can you do me a favor really quick? If you're catching me live, drop a 1 in the comments. If you're catching the replay, drop a number 2 in the comments. And if you're new and this is the first time you're ever catching one of my videos, can you just drop a new in the comments? I'd really appreciate that. I just want to know who's new and viewing me for the first time. I am a work from home mom of 3. My children, my boys are my biggest blessings and my biggest challenges. And hey, Eric. And, so every day is an adventure in the Edwards family, for sure. Today was no exception. I actually kept the kids out from school today because we went to see a PANDAS specialist. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about PANDAS and what it is. Now, mind you, I am no expert on this. I have researched the hell out of this for about, the past month, pretty much. It's been something I heard of this several months ago. I thought, this could apply to my kids, but they did not fit the bill 100%. And so it was definitely, something that was in the back of my head for a while, but I never really thought that it was what the issue was because they don't have ticks. Okay. And so, it was one of those things where I was kind of like, on the fence about, and I had mentioned it to my kids' neurologist. They go to a neurodevelopmental pediatrician, and I mentioned it to her when we were there on September 1st, and she didn't really say yay or nay. I asked her real quick and then we moved on to another subject and I forgot about it. But anyway, I wanted to inform you guys what this is. I wanted to tell you our story, and I know that there are other people going through this, and I thought that maybe by getting the word out and sharing how our situation unfolded, it might be helpful to someone. So feel free to share this if you know someone who might want to learn more about this. And I'm just going to go over what I know. Like I said, I am no expert. I am just learning about this stuff, and we are just at the beginning of the process with this. But I thought I'd share what's going on. So what is PANDAS anyway? Let's get into that first. Pediatric autoimmune neuropsychiatric disorder associated with streptococcal, I can't even say that, infection. So strep A, right? Strep throat, there's strep throughout your body, potentially. It doesn't necessarily have to be in your throat. It can live in your gut. It's kind of crazy. There is also something called PANS, which is very similar, but it's not linked to strep. Okay, and in a nutshell, it is a misdirected immune response that results in inflammation of the brain. Okay, and as a result of this inflammation, the child quickly exhibits like life-changing symptoms that come on very suddenly. And those symptoms could be anything from like OCD to anxiety, tics that are either motor related, which are like, something that you would consider a tic that a child with maybe Tourette's would have, something like that. Vocal tics, same with Tourette's kind of thing. My son my one son, Andrew, he's the only one that had any kind of thing that I would remotely consider a tic. And I was Googling this 2 years ago because he has like this vocal thing where he'll just suddenly scream, and it's mostly in the car, which is very enjoyable, as you can imagine. He'll just suddenly scream or make noise, and in the spring he started with die, the word die. It was like die, 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 die. He was telling everybody to die. And so that's one of them. Tics, personality changes, decline in math and handwriting abilities, aggression, which is a big one for us, sensory sensitivities. I noticed that a couple of years ago when Andrew was on stage. He started covering his ears when the other kids were singing. There you go. Motor abnormalities, restrictive eating, developmental and behavioral regression, sleep disturbances, depression. From my kids made a lot of they had like suicide ideation, where they started talking about dying and wanting to die and wanting to kill themselves. Andrew was threatening to stab himself with a knife. Emotional roller coasters, basically, severe separation anxiety, and severely oppositional behaviors. And the biggest characteristic of all of this is an abrupt onset of these symptoms, or a recurring course of severity. So in our situation, so I'll just go back a little bit and tell you our story about how this whole thing started with Andrew. Andrew was very, we had issues with Aiden because Aiden was already having behavioral things going on. And at the time, 3 years ago, Andrew was fine. I never had any issues with him. And then he started daycare and everything went fine. And he was potty trained there. Everything was great. He was in one classroom. He moved up in the fall to a different classroom. Everything started out okay. His behavior was fine. And then one day, it just changed. In going through my Facebook, believe it or not, I pieced together that he had the flu mist vaccine in October of 2014. I'm not sure if that had anything to do with anything, but within a couple of days he had a fever. And so he was obviously fighting something. Within a month, because about a month later, Nolan was born. I know that when Nolan was born, my two older boys had strep throat. So I know that there was probably strep around at that point in time, but around the time of the flu mist is when his behavior totally changed. All of a sudden, he had separation anxiety every day, would cry when I would drop him off at school. Suddenly we started having behavioral issues at school, where he was a little bit aggressive or he wasn't sharing toys. All of a sudden it was he was a different kid. And, being a mom of a child who was already diagnosed with autism, high functioning autism, I was looking for signs of that. In my second child, who was Andrew, and I wasn't really seeing them, and so I was always alert for this kind of stuff. And then when we started seeing this behavioral change, we thought maybe it was because I was pregnant, and he thought he knew this, or thought something was going on, and felt the changes coming, whatever. So we didn't really question it at the time. I thought that was part of the separation anxiety. I thought that was why things were going the way they were. Hey, Clyde, how are you? And hi, Rachel. I didn't even greet you, but thanks for watching. It turns out, obviously, I thought about it. I wondered what was going on with this kid, how he had suddenly changed. Pretty darn near overnight, he became aggressive. And that's when he and Aiden really started fighting all the time. They didn't fight before then, which is interesting. They really didn't fight. That's when they started fighting, getting aggressive with each other. He then started with this very oppositional behavior. And I just know, there is no other person on the face of the earth that can get me from zero to rage like Andrew. Okay. He would just, push my buttons and be fresh and whatever. And then when I would go to chase him, he used to hide on top of the bunk beds in our house, and he would literally get up there and laugh at me, and I would get so mad, and he would just do things on purpose to aggravate me, and to aggravate his brothers, and to aggravate everybody, and then ultimately we did end up getting a diagnosis from his neurodevelopmental pediatrician that he has ADHD and he has oppositional defiant disorder, which is fun. Anyone who has a child with that can tell you it's fun. It's not at all. But I'm very interested to find that these are all also symptoms of this PANDAS. So, of course, part of my brain is going, oh my gosh, like what if all of the stuff that he's been diagnosed with all along isn't even the case? So it's interesting, and I wanted to share that story because, there may be more to the story than a child just being oppositional. The other big thing with him is that he's got a very restrictive diet. He doesn't eat much besides cheese and bread, which are probably like the two worst things for you. And I have a cat who's trying to jump up on me. But it's like, it's been really crazy. So as being the mom of children on the autism spectrum, I'm in a number of different groups, and I have a lot of friends that also have children on the spectrum. And when I was talking about how oppositional Andrew could be, I had a few people over time reach out to me and ask me, have you looked into PANDAS? Have you thought about it? Like that happened again recently, and that's really what triggered me to start thinking about this and looking more into it. And then I did watch the documentary called My Kid Is Not Crazy. If you have a child who suddenly has started exhibiting any of these symptoms, right? So any kind of sudden OCD or anxiety or tics or personality changes, and I would highly recommend checking out that documentary. I think it's $3.99 to rent on Vimeo is where I watched it, and my husband and I watched it and literally cried. It's really hard. It's really hard to watch. It's really hard to watch what some of these families have gone through, before, and I didn't think I was going to get upset. Sorry. But to see, people have it so much worse than we do. But it is still, really, really hard to watch your child, struggle so much, and, you don't know how to help them. So, but anyway, so this whole thing, the reason why I felt compelled to share this is because this condition actually is estimated to impact 1 in 200 kids. So it's so much more common than you think. The problem is that pediatricians don't know about it, or pediatricians don't believe in it. It's a controversial thing, and because it's so controversial, they don't want to test for it. So I actually did mention it when Andrew was diagnosed with strep last month. I did go to his pediatrician. I took him there and asked the nurse practitioner who I saw about PANDAS. I asked if he was familiar with it. He said yes. So I said, what would be the chances of being able to get, a blood test done to see how, they call it a titer, to see how high his antibodies to strep are. And he's like, well, I could give you a script for this ASO, it's called, a titer. And I said, well, I have a friend who's going through the same thing, and she gave me a list of other things that are suggested to test with it. And he's like, absolutely not doing any other testing. That is it. So when I asked for the additional testing, I got so much pushback that I was honestly, like, I was turned off immediately. And I said, you know what? I am going to somebody that I know is an expert on this subject and that I know will be able to read the results from my blood test. Because if he's giving me this much of a pushback on asking for additional tests, like, what kind of information am I ultimately going to get from him? So I had the feeling that he was kind of BSing me about how familiar he was with it. And just knowing how controversial the subject is, I decided to go right to an expert. So the doctor who we went to see in Ramsey, New Jersey, was actually Dr. Trifoletti, but he is in the documentary that I told you about, My Kid Is Not Crazy. And so, like, you know, I figured that he would be the best source. And I will tell you that we are going to pay out the wazoo to see him, which is kind of frustrating. And no, honestly, we don't have the money aside for this. You know, we're kind of taking a risk and putting it on credit cards, and, you know, like, but we're doing what we have to do. And unfortunately, you know, Andrew's not the only one who's dealing with this. I also see it in Aiden, and in discussing it, I wasn't going to have Aiden, you know, I wasn't going to talk to him about Aiden, because Aiden doesn't have as much of the symptoms as Andrew does. But ultimately, I decided that I could not live with myself if I didn't have it checked out and didn't talk to him about it and run it past him. I want to get all the blood work done for both of them. Reason being is that I can diagnose their strep now that I've been looking out for it for, you know, a month or two. I can honestly diagnose it before the doctors can, or before we even approach the doctors. And the reason being is that their behavior completely changes. It's like suddenly they're aggressive. Suddenly they're very oppositional and fighting over everything. Suddenly homework becomes like a meltdown worthy situation for Aiden. They start talking about death. They start talking about how they'd rather die than do homework, or, you know, go to things and whatever. I know that I'm skipping a lot of stuff that I want to talk about here, but the one thing that I wanted to mention is, like, you know, I learned from the doctor today that there are two parts of the brain that are affected by this condition, which he said he doesn't consider a disease, but it is a different way of the body reacting, kind of like a fever. Okay. But the two parts of the brain that are affected are the basal ganglia, which drives tics and OCD in a child, and the amygdala, which is where you see the fight or flight, where, you know, the aggression, the anxiety, the need to, like, literally run from a situation, like, you know, like running from blood work today, but we'll get to that. And like, you know, it's totally them. It's just crazy. But anyway, so our anxiety, like, it was kind of crazy. When we were in Mexico was the first time that we really saw this. And you know, I'm just going to give you some examples of what we've experienced. So, because I've been very, like, high level so far. When we were in Mexico, Andrew had this sudden fear develop of flooding. And we had a jacuzzi tub in the middle. We had two of them, actually, in the middle of our rooms. And we ran some water into it. And all of a sudden, he had, like, this full-on panic over the whole room getting flooded if that thing overflowed. And it was like a real irrational fear where he just started freaking out and you know, like, crying and just, like, would not get in it. And so, you know, it's a little bit crazy. And then, you know, it just got worse from there. Like, he wouldn't take a bath. He would not take a shower. My husband had to take him in the shower, and he literally screamed the whole stinking time. I have a cat now climbing right here. And he screamed the whole time. He refused to take a shower. And you would have thought that we were killing him. He was trying to get out. We had to lock him in the glass shower. So he couldn't get out. Like, he needed to bathe at some point. And it was just crazy. And, you know, I just always felt with him, like, I don't know why a child would get so much pleasure at trying to twist the screw and make everybody around him unhappy. You know, like, so it just never really made sense to me. And so I felt like I was always on the lookout for, there's got to be more to this. And so, you know, I think we found it. We went today, like I said, to see the doctor. What we did was learn more about this. He learned more about my kids, and part of it is doing blood work. And so they do blood work to test for, like I said, antibodies for strep. They also want to find out exactly what is the cause of what is the trigger of this condition. The triggers could be, like I said, one is from strep. PANDAS is from strep. PANS could be from something else. It could be from mycoplasma. It could be from Coxsackie virus. It could be from Epstein-Barr virus, which is mono. You know, so like there's some common things here that can cause this. And so I really wanted to just get the word out about, you know, if you have a child or you know a child who suddenly had this intense personality change, obsessive compulsive behavior, anxiety, is suddenly like really aggressive, throwing things. My kids like to threaten, like even Aiden threatens to throw chairs. You know, we've had issues with school because of that. And he is not violent. You know, like I mean, if he talks about hurting anybody, it's himself. He would never want to hurt anybody else. So like for him to do things like that, it's just kind of strange, but it explains a lot. So we'll see how it goes. We got one kid, his blood work today, but they have to draw so much blood for this that a 45-pound child, they could not do it all in one day for him. And so we have to go back again. And the second child, Aiden, who is 10 and, you know, 70 pounds, it's a little bit more tough to hold him still. He would not allow us to hold him still, and he was freaking out so much. They couldn't even find his veins, and he refused to drink water, and that's just, you know, everything, the whole fight or flight kicked in for him. He ran out of the office as soon as we let him go. And now he's refusing to ever let us do the blood work, so I'm not sure how we're going to do this. We did get a script for Xanax, and, you know, but they're pills, and my kids don't swallow pills, so that's the next challenge. And so we're going to have to totally give him Xanax and see how that works out, and see if he'll take it, and you know, whether or not we get to draw the blood. I thinking that maybe the kid just needs to be knocked down and we need to carry him in and get it done, because honestly I'm not sure how I'm going to get him in. And unfortunately it takes two of us to do blood draws in this family, so it's unfortunate, but I am not doing this to complain. I don't want anyone to feel bad for me. Thank you so much, Kim. I don't want you to feel bad for us. I mean, like, you know what, we're getting through it, but if we can help other people know that their child does not necessarily need to be on antidepressants or any kind of antipsychotic drugs. I mean, I will tell you, I asked the neurodevelopmental pediatrician, I asked her if Andrew had bipolar disorder. And, you know, thankfully I had a neurologist who was hesitant to give him that label at this age. At 6 years old, she was like, it is too young to commit to that. So, but I saw symptoms of bipolar disorder. And, you know, I mean, not that I'm that familiar with it, but when you're manic or you're completely depressed and no one loves you and everyone hates you and everyone's mean to you and you're crying and you want to die, and then the next second you're bouncing off the walls, I'm like, it seems bipolar to me. But I mention this because, you know, there may be other things at play here, and if we don't over-medicate our children, in the long run, it's going to be way better, especially because the medication won't work. So if you're having issues and you have a child, or you know someone who has a child who has any of the issues or can relate to any of this, and you know, is not getting results from medication, I mean, it's worth looking into as well. So start Googling, and if I can help anyone with any questions and share anything more that I learn along the way, I'd be very, very happy to do so. So please feel free to reach out. Like I said, I am not an expert on this, but unfortunately, you know, when we have our kids go through things in life, we become sudden experts. And you know, behold the power of the Google. Anyway, thank you all for tuning in. Thank you for watching. If you've made it this far, I really do appreciate it. Again, if you got any value from this, or know anybody who could benefit from hearing anything about this, or you know, could use my help in talking through some stuff, just feel free to reach out to me, and feel free to share my video. All right, thank you all so much. I appreciate it. Have a great night. I'm going to finally unwind. Bye. Take care.